Okay, my outstanding friends, this is just over the top crazy. Usually you are the recipient of the shocker du jour. Today, I am the recipient of the shocker du jour supreme. Wait till you see this. This is unbelievable. This covers so many bases at one time. Have you ever heard of Wrangle Island, which is off the northeast coast of Siberia? They're saying inbreeding not to blame for woolly mammoth extinction. Surprising study finds. This just came out this morning, a couple hours ago. I have a kind of a link to this. Wait, this is like Christmas. Okay, so why am I so excited? Why is this so fabulous? Well, these are the woolly mammoths, and they had it all figured out. They died because of interbreeding and all this stuff. And like I say, I have a connection to this, and I'll tell you in a second. But I can guarantee you, almost 100% certain, every one of these is going to be completely flat on one side, and this side is going to be good. They died in the Great Flood, just as my mud fossils did. Now, they were in a cold area, and this is up by Siberia. Look at this. Who lives on Wrangle Island? Well, polar bears and walruses and giant whales, and this is up by Russia and Alaska. It's in between Russia and Alaska in the United States, and it's way up there in the cold. Now remember the cold, all right? That's important to remember first. Okay, you know, I discovered mud fossils, wrote a paper on it, fascia-facilitated fossilization, which is the coating preserved like this long, but flat as a pancake on the back, because it was in the Great Flood. And in the region of the world that I'm in, the waters were boiling, literally boiling. Now up there, I don't think it would be quite so hot in the waters, maybe, I don't know. But the flesh did not boil off of these creatures. Down where I am here in Connecticut, United States, all of the flesh boiled off of these creatures and left their organs and left, you know, bits and pieces of them. These are all, that's a lung, same thing, flat, just flat as a pancake. And they all died, and the flesh boiled off them, which left a red bed, and then gray clay, and then a black cap. And the reason everything boiled is we almost got hit by Venus, which was a comet at that time. And this is all recorded in the ancient texts, and Velikovsky wrote all of the papers on this. Every culture had the same story. We almost got hit by a fiery comet, which boiled the oceans. Now, I don't think the flesh boiled off of these. They just died, laid flat on the ground, and then because it was cold up there, they were preserved. You know, the flesh didn't even turn to stone. I think a lot of these things are actually still fleshy. And a lot of the stuff that is in the Arctic regions is literally now starting to bleed out. And they're giant creatures, giant creatures. Now the woolly mammoths, they were little tiny puppy things compared to the things I'm talking about. So I got several years going on, and nobody will listen to me about fascia-facilitated fossilization. So I had DNA done on these, like this was done, and two giant human beings. One of them had a 3-foot long fingertip, and the other one had a little over 3-foot wide hand. And they're both, no question, they're human, because the DNA was done, plus some CAT scans were done. This is a hair follicle. That's the erector pili muscle. That right there is the sebaceous gland, the hair shaft, that oils it up. This is the hair root, and there's the vein and the artery. That's a hair follicle. I mean, I'm talking about creatures that were extremely large. So I tried to present this everywhere in the world, and nobody would listen. So I wrote the paper in 2015, Fascia-Facilitated Fossilization. It speaks all about how this had happened and all of these creatures that were, you know, preserved that nobody knows about. Nobody knows about these things because they won't be allowed to be talked about. And that's what happened. So then I ended up, this is what's so excellent about this. Remember what the statement was here. It's proven now. Inbreeding not to blame for woolly mammoth. Listen to what they have to say, and then I'm going to show you how I engaged with the top guy that was working on this. So this is just out a couple hours ago. Now here's what they have to say. The woolly mammoth ended, and that was it. It was a sickly affair. Now this is off Wrangle Island, where they were pretty much isolated up off the coast of Siberia. And this happened 4,000 years ago. Now they thought that it was a dwindling population and interbreeding caused them to go extinct. All right, new research shows that they were wrong. They're just totally wrong. We can now confidently reject the idea that the population was simply too small and they were doomed to go extinct for genetic reasons, says evolutionary geneticist Love Dalen of the Center for Paleogenetics, collaboration between Swedish Museum and Natural History and Stockholm University. This means it was probably just some random event that killed them off, and if that random event hadn't happened, then we would still have mammoths today. Now they say this was about 4,000 years ago. Yeah. All right, let's take it from here. It is right here. Wrangle Island became the final bastion for the woolly mammoths as temperatures rose. It was still a freezing area up there. That's what they say, and then their numbers dwindled, and they really don't know what happened. They say they think this, they think that. Well, I'll show you what the end result is of their thinking. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, it was the Great Flood. It says the finding returns a giant question mark to the last days of the woolly mammoth. What happened to them? How did they end up going extinct? What happened at the end is a bit of a mystery still. We don't know why they went extinct after having been more or less fine for 6,000 years, but we think it was something sudden, says Dunning. I would say there is still hope to figure out why they went extinct, but no promises. Well, Darlene, I think I can show you why, and I think I can make promises. All right, this is just too cool. This is from the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. This is big deal. This is just out today. Last surviving woolly mammoth were inbred, but not doomed to extinction. Virtually all species get inbred. So this is a detailed explanation of the woolies just died off. They just died off for no reason that they can come up with, but they were exceptionally preserved. Why? Exceptional preservation of soft-bodied creatures promoted by silica-rich oceans. Let's see if we can determine what happened to these woolly mammoths. This is exceptional preservation of soft-bodied creatures. This is Yale University from 2016. I presented all my stuff to Derek Briggs. I wrote a paper in 2015. As a matter of fact, here it is right here, about the fascia facilitated fossilization, which was caused exceptional preservation. It's just the same thing, basically the same thing that Yale wrote. And it was by fascia, certainly, and which is skin is fascia as well as every other coating. However, in the region I was in, the waters were so hot that it boiled the flesh off of everything and left the organs, just left the organs is all. Wherever there was fascia surrounding organs, it preserved, and it was because of this silica came up, and the silica, which is right here, came down from phosphorus. Phosphorus is your membranes. Membranes is like this right here. This is fascia. All right, fascia pleura called in a lung, but anything that coats you, your skin, membranes, they're all made out of phosphorus, which boils down to aluminum silicates, which is what this is made out of. All feldspar. is made out of aluminum silicates, all of it, 100%. It has other inclusions in with it, but aluminum silicate is the primary base unit of molecules. Now, I wrote this in 2015. I submitted it to Yale. I submitted it to everybody. Nobody would listen. Nobody at all in the entire world. As a matter of fact, by this time I had already gotten so pissed off. I did CAT scans, DNA. I wrote to David Attenborough in 2014, and he wrote back. I was really surprised. I got to be honest. And I told him, I said, this stuff didn't happen that long ago. The things that you're looking at were a product of the Great Flood, and I'm sure I confused the hell out of him, because he says I'm mystified by what you're talking about, and I've never done a video on mud fossils. I know nothing of the subject. My interest is not in recent entombment, but things that were millions of years old. Well, they're not millions of years old. That's the key. That's what I was trying to explain, but he didn't understand either. Nobody understands it, because they didn't take the time to look at it, really. And it's unfortunate for David Attenborough. He lived his whole life looking at this stuff, never really understanding what he was even looking at. Now, let's just take these elephant-looking things. Why would they be so unbelievably preserved? The flesh and everything is on them. Everything. They're perfectly preserved. I'm sure there's tons of blood in them and everything else, because we found them certainly with blood in them. Now, the only reason this happened was because the waters were not as boiling hot there, I'm sure, being up towards the pole, as they were during the equator areas. And this could have very well been a little bit distant from where the impact zone was, because that would have been where it really boiled. And they died just like that. Some of them still had food in their mouth, so they died instantly. And then I would say that they had to be covered. I'm going to ask for a couple of things to be found out about this, about the conditions of the soil and the silicon content in the skin and all that stuff. Let's look at that. What I could say could tell us for sure if they died during the same event as all of these other creatures, which is the Great Flood. And I'm telling you right now, on one side of them is going to be flat as a pancake, just like my stuff right here. Flat, flat, flat. The other side just absolutely flawless. Same thing with my buddy here, Caesar Augustus. There was all kinds of creatures here. It wasn't just elephants and woolly mammoths and human beings. There was human beings. That's a human. I'm 100% certain. It's DNA tested. And I mean, I drilled in here deep, and it was dense and excellent quality, and you could just get blood right out here. It's just saturated with blood. This is a goose or some kind of waterfowl. There's his little nose hole here, and there's his eyeball, his bill or beak or whatever they call it coming here. Now, there's his actual feather patterns. And if anybody knows what that feather pattern is, that one big feather on the top, and then they come out on the sides. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's one big one on the top. I can't find anybody. Well, I can't figure out what it is. But it certainly looks like a waterfall to me. And he was laying flat like this, and it snapped off his neck. There's his neck right there. That's the artery, and I've done a catalase test on there, and it bubbles, and I believe that's the vein right over here, and that's his neck, and this side is flat as a pancake. Again, he died flat like this. Now, this right here is where his throat comes up and comes in. So there's some little cavitation here that it's a little different than the rest of this flat. So. But that's, I'm sure, or actually it could be his artery. I think it's got something to do with his throat. Yeah, I always go with throat. Anyway, that's Caesar Augustus. Now, I have so much of this stuff, I could go on for days, which I do. I can't help myself. It's just too much. It is what it is. And all my other stuff, I have 2 other things that DNA tested, gigantic giants. And this is what blows them out, because when I say I had a link to this, I took a course from the guy that wrote the paper on this. And we went back and forth, and it worked about the same as it does every time. Now, let me just ask for these questions to be answered about these woolly mammoths. All right, don't forget, Worlds in Collision by my hero, Immanuel Velikovsky, said that we were almost hit by Venus, 15th century BC. So that's like 3,700 years ago. Now, that planet, Venus, was ejected from Jupiter, which I have shown came from the Great Red Spot, as a comet or comet-like object, but it was the size of Earth, and it almost hit Earth, but not an actual collision. All right? So, the waters boiled. Not only did they boil, the Earth literally almost stopped rotating. And it might have actually stopped. That's what it says in the ancient texts. Now, at the same time, the flood waters, because if the Earth stopped, the water doesn't stop like the Earth does. And all from the deep, deep ocean, this silicon issue is right here. Siliceous ooze, that's silicon, silica, is a type of biogenic pelagic sediment located on the deep ocean floor. It's primarily made of silicates, silicon, SiO2. That's what happened. That's what caused all of this thing. Exceptional preservation promoted by silica-rich oceans. They have no idea why they're silica-rich. Well, they were silica-rich because there was this giant organic flood because we almost got hit by Venus. That's it. All right, here's from my paper in 2015. I said skin will have 50 times the silicon as other tissues because it was exposed to the silicon-rich flood. And then I was talking about fascia is the fluid-filled highway. Fluid-filled, well, they call it fluid-filled highway now, but I called it a tubular fluid-filled fabric network that configures itself all around every organ, and it's supposed to instantly reconfigure itself if it's damaged. Otherwise, you get sick. That's how invasion goes through your tissues. And then I made some other statements all about it. And anyway, this is about how these things happen. And basically, I explain how it happened, and I had other papers written on it and all that. But at that point, I had already had DNA tests and CAT scans and everything done, and nobody would listen. Now, here's where I got involved with the guy that wrote the paper on this. All right, this is Johns Hopkins University. Now, this is the main guy, Steven Salzberg. He was the top guy. Complete Columbian mammoth. Mitogenome suggests interbreeding with woolly mammoths. Now, his explanation for their extinction was that they interbred and they all died off. So, I took a course at Johns Hopkins with Steven Salzberg as the professor. And we went back and forth, and I was, because it was called genomics, which you learn how the gene sequences affect different things in the body and how they turn on and off and how they're, the molecules. It was pretty involved, but no big deal. And they saw that as, well, the genes weren't all staying exactly the same, so they were mutating or going, and then they just ran out of gas and they all just died instantly. And they were perfectly preserved. I mean, that's just insanity. It's absolutely insanity. I mean, I don't want to be rude, but they didn't just all of a sudden die, fall over because they had interbreeding. No, they died from the Great Flood. Now, here's my questions. Hold on a second. Let's go back to Steve. So anyway, Steven Salzberg and I interacted back and forth, and I asked him a bunch of questions about the genomes, and boy, he was excited to answer. I could tell. And it was real good. It was nice. And I said to him, I said, I have a little work of my own. Now, this was right after I had written that paper about fascia-facilitated fossilization. I decided I would go everywhere in the world, anybody that was an expert, and basically confront them. Now, I led up to him really gently. and I let him explain all his information about why these things went extinct. And then I said, I do have some information I'd like to submit to you. And I sent him some CAT scans and some DNA tests and, some pictures of the specimens and everything. And it was fairly detailed. I figured he'd look at it. 8 minutes later, I got something back that said I was a crazy person, and anybody that could think like I think was, it was a kind of a nasty response, to be perfectly honest with you. And of course, we parted ways. And that's just what happens everywhere that I was in academia. Now, normally they won't talk to you at all. So I went to all the schools. I did. I went to the University of Geneva for physics about my light research, and they talked. We went back and forth. I went to Johns Hopkins for this. I've gone to other universities that I really didn't ever have to go back and forth with them. I just wanted to get information from. But some of them I went to just confront, and that just never worked. If I was a student, I'd just be wasting my money. You're wasting my money. I'd like to talk to you about this. No. You just listen to me. That's it. Okay, I think I made my case pretty clear. This, again, is from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This is peer-reviewed, so they're starting to understand the things that they've always just accepted, they have to relook at. And this was just released today. Now, they're talking about the population of these woolly mammoths and how they were stable and and they had some gene interruptions, and they came from a very limited number gene pool, and they think there was interbreeding. Well, yeah, there's only a few individuals to start with, they say. But the point being here is that they say they died off about 4,000 years ago. Now, Velikovsky puts this catastrophe at about 3,500 years ago. Now, there was also two other events that Velikovsky acknowledged that were also catastrophes. Could they have been one of those? Who knows? Which just affected the northern region there. But they all died virtually instantaneously. They fell over they look like they're sleeping. That's not dying. Look at the thing. Look, wake up, get up, it's time to eat. Now, what is the bed that's under there? Because if it was the Great Flood, it would be, you're going to have a red bed, a gray clay, or red greenish clay, or even blue, and then a black cap. And the reason is, the red bed is boiled flesh. In my area of the world, it's the red bed is the Triassic red bed. And that's the boiled, literally, flesh off. Their flesh didn't boil off because they were in a cold. It probably just didn't boil up there or something, I don't know. But it boiled down where all of these things were just boiled right out of the creature's body, flat as a pancake. That's a lung, and that's the pleura of the lung pushed away. That's the actual lungs alveoli, those little tiny bumps on there. Those are where the alveoli take the air inside here. And that's a lung right there. That's a lung that completely devoided itself. It's completely, everything's gone out of it. All right, and here's a lung that preserved perfectly. I don't know what kind of creature it's from, but it's absolutely flawless, except the hole in the back where, like this hole here comes in, where you get your big air flow coming through. It's just filled in with quartz because it was a hole. Quartz filled up wherever there was holes in my area. Now up there, they didn't boil, they just died from whatever it was. It might have been a flash impact or whatever. But I can almost guarantee you 100%. Every one of these, the back will be flat as a pancake, just completely flat. They pick it up, it's just completely flat. And all of my stuff is that way, almost all of it. There's going to be one flat side and the rest could be absolutely flawless, just like Caesar here. That's perfect. That's as perfect as it gets. Feather pattern, feathers, everything. And that's because they're made out of phospholipids, which is collagens. They're connective tissues. They're fibrous. They're tough as hell. And that's, this is the side of his throat. And there's something going on there. See those little lines? Every time I see something different. But he's died laying flat like that. As all my stuff basically, well, when you die in a flood, you end up sinking to the bottom. Most of them did. And the silicon infused into virtually everything. Some stuff stayed actually like it was brand new, like it was still alive. That flesh looks like you could eat it. You're a little tough on the old mandibles, but who knows? I got interrupted a couple times, but I think I showed you this about the exceptional preservation of soft-bodied creatures because of the silica. And that came up from the deep ocean floors because of the almost impact creating a flood that did the entire globe. And this layer of fossilization occurs in a strata worldwide, everywhere, these three layers: the red bed, the gray clay, black cap. And these were the Earth's earliest, they say the earliest creatures that ever lived died during this great cataclysm. They're acknowledging this. And this is Yale, and this is a year after, and this is the guy I worked, well, I didn't work with him, he wouldn't work with me, Derek Briggs. But I had presented all my stuff to him, and now they took a paper about it. And actually NASA funded him for this, because I sent my stuff to NASA too. And they must have, I can't think of any other reason they'd go to Yale to find out about mud fossils, other than that I sent them this stuff, and then this shows up. You see this? Earth's earliest community of sea creatures. Well, the whole Earth was sea creature at the time because it's worldwide. It's a worldwide layer. They say they lived in a warm, slimy petri dish, nurtured by a broad array of exotic species. We likely wouldn't know about them at all if not for a quirk in the chemistry of ancient oceans. And the quirk was that it was filled with silicon. And that's because when we almost got hit by Venus, the siliceous ooze, which is a very heavy ooze, and it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, it rose up and supersaturated the waters and created silica. And that's why you see veins of silicon. And they always talk about silica. Well, this is a heart made out of silicon. You know what? I'm going to show you something right now before we go any further. But they're saying that they discovered all this stuff, Yale. Let me show you something made out of silicon that there's no way you can refute. All right, I had this all figured out by the time they wrote this paper, and my paper preceded theirs by a year or more. A Yale-led research team found these creatures, Edicarobiota just is the name they gave them, are a collection of marine fossils. That means they lived in the ocean. They say sandstone, it was mud. And they record the operation of an unusual mechanism, preserved the impressions of the creatures. No, it preserved the entire creature. They say they were only soft-bodied. Only soft-bodied. Findings appear in the journal Geology, which was the one that said extreme, well, it's this one right here. Exceptional preservation. Anyway, they're saying this all happened 541 years ago. Now, they're saying the creatures were small or up to a meter large, but that's it. And they were nothing but soft. They had no teeth, no bones. All that's nonsense. I showed you right there. There's a bone right there. They had lungs, geese. They're all from the same era, because I'm in the Triassic. These all came out of Triassic. And I have a Triassic human footprint. I have all this stuff, and my stuff is tested, and I stand it up in front of anybody. So they say they're outright bizarre in appearance. Yes, some of them are, no question. They don't resemble anything alive today. Now it says they want to understand. What about these things? Was it some sort of failed evolutionary experiment? Or do some of them still exist? Yes, they do still exist. A big part involves figuring out how they were able to form. Yes, I told them how they formed. They formed because of silica-rich oceans and almost being hit by Venus and boiled them. It says they were entirely soft-bodied. Not true whatsoever. They lived before evolution of shells, teeth, or bones. Completely wrong. They're typically the only parts of an organism to become fossilized. In the mud fossils, it's just the opposite. Bones dissolved if they were free-floating bones. They just dissolved. Same thing with trees. But fleshy stuff that was coated with collagen. That's the key. Collagen made them survive. And blood was very, very preservative. Now, here's what they say. What the researchers, which was me, realized was the oceans during the time were much richer in dissolved silica than they are today. Nobody knows why, though. Why? Why, Yale? Why was it richer? It enabled the transformation to occur into rock over a matter of hours rather than of thousands to millions of years. It happens pretty quick. Now, I don't say with hours. Anyway, the organisms rapidly buried by sand during underwater storm events. Yeah, because we almost got hit by Venus, and everything in the earth tumbled. All of the waters tumbled, and the siliceous ooze, which is nothing more than heavy, dense silicon, and it is heavy. I use it on my plants. And you take a quart bottle of this silica, and it weighs about, at least, it's got to weigh twice as much as water. And it sinks. I'll show you that in a second. Anyway, it must have happened rapidly, yes. Yes. And the mud burying them preserved them. Now, this was Derek Briggs, was the guy I submitted all my stuff to years before this. Any CAT scans, DNA, and all that, it was dismissed. Now, the research, though, was by the National Science Foundation, and then these, whatever this is, and American Philosophical Society, and then NASA, who I submitted my stuff to NASA, too, and to JPL, and to all of them. Anybody, because NASA put out a bunch of stuff from the Curiosity rover, which is exactly the same. The Mars blueberries are the same as the Moki marbles. And then they just said, oh, and then they also showed Mars crab, which they said, how did this form? And he says, oh, that's just pareidolia. We don't want to talk about that. No, it was biology, and it was an artery servicing muscle, and that's up on Mars. So I sent NASA my stuff about that. And all of a sudden they're funding Yale about this, and Yale says, yes, this stuff did occur here on Earth, and they can't figure it out. They have no idea how. Well, I did. I told them how, and I know how, and it's not that complicated. It's because being buried in the mud and being boiled first, then being buried in the mud, which was the red bed, was really basically the red flesh. And when the creature gets buried in that red mud, it doesn't even know it's dead. I said that in my paper, look, from 2015. I said, somewhere I said in here, look, it says, fascia has a job to do. Fascia is the coating. It protects and separates tissue, and it does it well during your lifetime. Guess what? If you die and are buried quickly and stay wet and compacted in fine, wet mud, the fascia does not know you are dead. It still keeps working. It's doing fine. like I say, this, and nobody will listen. They're listening now. I could see they're listening. All right, there's not a scientist on the planet except moi, which means me, who understands this skull is a crystal skull from a living human being at one time. These are the nerve fibers that are inside that skull. They didn't scratch these on there. These are the nerve fibers in a human skull that's had a, whatever they call that kind of scan, and these are the different bundles of fibers. And this was from a living person. This is not this thing turned into pictures. You see how the bulb in the back sticks out way out here? This one goes that way and leaves a big cavity here. Well, why would that happen? Why wouldn't it be like that? It was on its face. This thing was tipped that way and laying on its lip and its nose. That's why they're flattened out. Now the teeth, they're just fabulous. I don't know, man. I'll tell you, that's just unbelievable. That's why at first I said, it's impossible. Who could have teeth like that? Certainly not me. But other than that, I mean, explain that to me. There's nobody in the world could do this. This cannot be done. Impossible. You couldn't even do it today. I don't think. Maybe with a 3D printer, some fabulous thing. But this is silicon. That is silicon, and everything turned into silicon. I have silicon hearts. Here's one right here. That's a silicon heart. There's the aorta right there. That's some little blood that's left over from another little investment. That is the blood artery that goes down and separates the chambers. All right, and I have another one here that I cut in half to look at this right here. These are the heartstrings, and they're inside the heart. And you look at the collagens don't take on the silicon like other parts of the body. That's why this is just filled up, because that one actually sunk away. That would have been a cavity, but it filled up with silicon. But all of these other parts filled up with silicon. It's called nucleophilic invasion. And they come in and they invade and push out the other molecules, and then they become stable. That's why the silicon becomes very stable. But it pushes everybody else out, and then the silicon bonds with itself. And then you end up with virtually all silicon. But it can't bond with these tendinous fibers. The silicon does not work well with nerve fibers and the connective tissue. Let's just go with connective tissue. Silicon normally does not invade that. That's why all this stuff is gone, and we're down. It's invaded the bone, it's invaded the soft tissues of the brain, everything, but not the nerve fibers. And these are the nerve fibers. There's no way anybody in their right mind could dismiss this. Not only that, I believe the jaw comes right off, just like your jaw would come off. If you took all your muscles and tendons off, it would just fall right off. The mandible. That thing is, there's no way you can dismiss this. So there was an event that allowed extreme amounts of silicon to invade, and exactly what Yale agreed to. And I would like to know, is there a lot of silicon in these woolly mammoths? And were they in a red bed? Hold on. All right, I'm going to leave it at this. Were they in like a red bed of clay, or what was this nature of the clay? Was there a black cap on this stuff? This will point to if it was the Great Flood, because it might not have been from the Great Flood. It might have been from some other event. I don't know. But it happened instantaneously. They died, blip, and then they were preserved, blip. And it's because of the cold that they were so well preserved. Now, my stuff, like I say, it boils off into actual body parts. And then they preserve quite well. But this, I believe those tissues are actually soft, a lot of them. Okay, I read this article and I couldn't find anything they talked about silicon. Now this is the National Library of Medicine, and this is about the preservation of collagen in soft tissues of frozen mammoths. And this is, they took samples of these baby mammoths and they analyzed them for virtually everything there is, except silicon. I couldn't find anything about silicon, all kind of amino acid, this and that. It's a very, very detailed study, but it's, you know, they're talking about triple peptide bonds and they're showing the different samples, and, you know, I mean, this is pretty well preserved stuff. It's very well preserved. And, you know, to show everything about it, this is muscle sarcomeres. You see those? This is 100 billionths of a meter, this distance here. These are the sarcomeres. That's, each one of these is a sarcomere. You see them? Boom, 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 boom. Those are muscles. And then they go into tendon and soft tissue. And they got everything about it, everything you could think of about it, except what I'm looking for, which is how much silicon. If somebody knows, I'd love them to tell me. Now, here's, they say there the collagen, which is the thing I'm talking about, which is the preservative, is very stable and abundant in animal tissues. Here we demonstrate preservation of collagen mammoth soft tissue for more than 10,000 years. Well, collagen is fascia. All right, it's collagens is fascia. So we're not too far off, only they don't realize there was a great flood. This only happened 3,500 years ago or so. And then there were several of these events. I'm not saying it was just one, but there was one that was the cataclysmic event that wiped out virtually almost everything on Earth and killed all the giants, which I have. I have giant creatures. And they have been DNA tested and CAT scanned pieces of the smaller giant. But the bigger one's just too huge. It's just his finger, just the tip of one finger is 3 feet long. All right, what I'm going to show you is a couple giant things that I can't show you here because they're too big. This I had CAT scan DNA tested. And these other two here, well, I had 3 of them done, all DNA tested, but excellent quality DNA was obtained from the 36-inch tip sample and the lung sample. This is the lung. The 36-inch tip I'll show you in a second. And I also had the hand done. Now, they were Homo sapien, mitochondrial B and D loop region. All right, and this was a very, very sophisticated test. It was done PCR and all that stuff. All right, now this was back in 2015. All right, so I had these done, and I had 7 CAT scans done by the best CAT scan place in the world, Jesse Garant and Associates. Absolutely fabulous facilities. They did 7 CAT scans, and they did them because they were so intrigued with the stuff that I presented to the representative I talked to, that they didn't even charge me. It was just unbelievable. Jesse Garant and Associates, absolute fabulous. You see this? These guys are big time. They do for everybody. They do all the top companies in the world. CAT scanning, they did 2D and 3D for me. X-ray sorting services, they got all kinds of stuff. Aerospace, archaeology, automotive, consumer, defense, energy, you name it, they do it. And they can see every little detail of what's going on. They have equipment that's just unsurpassed. And they're in, well, I don't know where they are now. They could be just about everywhere. But they were in Canada and the United States when I did business with them. That was 10 years ago. And I will never be able to thank them enough. Jesse Garant, Fabio, thank you, my good friends. It was an absolute delight to have you respond the way you did, because I'm not flush with money, and these things are not cheap to do usually, because we had another one done somewhere else. It's absolutely terrible, and they charged a ton of money, and these guys did just fabulous work. Jesse, again, Fabio, you guys are the best. All right, so these are the fossils I found on my property. I found these lungs. This one was the one that's right here, and I had that DNA tested, CAT scanned, and everything. It was just blood coming right out of it. All right, and I drilled a hole in there to get the blood out of it, so that I could send it off and get it tested, which I did. This one just actually, the blood just ran out of it. You see this? This is a lung. You see these little holes right here? This one completely transitioned into silicon because it lost all of its coating. So then all of the holes in the these are holes like this. Now, for some reason, this one took on silicon, this one didn't. All right, but it's basically the same lung, same type of lung. Now, this one, all the pleura left. This one, all the pleura stayed. This one, all the pleura left. This one, half the pleura stayed. And some of it just, folded over. But all of them, again, they're flat, totally flat. And so that was DNA tested and CAT scan. That was on that report. This was the fingertip. And that right there, if you look very carefully, that's where the fingernail was. This is the 2D done by Jesse Grant and Associates. You see that little area right there? That's where the fingernail went. And it would have gone up to here. And this right here is where the tendons lock in so you can move your hands or fingers around. This is from the back of that fingertip. Now look carefully there. This is a tendon. That's the core of the tendon. That's the blood running up alongside of it. This is the core of the tendon on the other side, and that's the blood running up alongside of that. Two different colored blood, because one of them's a vein, one of them's an artery. Now this right here is the actual bone. And normally they would be in the center. Now again, this is laid flat like this. So it didn't lay on its side like this way and the bone drifted down this way. That is a thumb, and that's from a right-hand person. From a right hand of a person. You see it, the chunk that hangs over the edge? That's the only finger that does that, is your thumb. One side's flat, going up this side, and the other side has a lump hanging over the edge, see? Anyway, so this was a right-hand thumb. And what else? So I had those CAT scanned. Now, the big one, now those came from this hand, which is about 3 feet, maybe up close to 4 feet wide. I can't remember. It's been a long time. I think I had 3 feet on this. Now, this skin right here, this silvery stuff. All right, you see it peeling up here? And then you've got the red meat. And literally, this is red fleshy flesh that's right down where your pads of your hand are. That's the pinch right there between your pads of your hand. This runs down, this pad, to your little finger. This is if you lay your hand back, you have one of those too. It's a tendon, runs right down the center, and the thumb runs off this way. All right, you see the silver skin? That's what's called script skin. And that's tough stuff. That's so you can do work. And it just wears off and it just keeps coming back. It's not like the skin on your face or anything. It's a very, very tough, and and you can't get blood out of that skin. Now, I got blood out of one of the fingertips, but this is very, very transitioned into mud. They do call this mudstone. But it was a creature's body, and I took it right out of where the artery was. So it was good. He said it was no problem. It's for sure it was human. But it wasn't as dense and excellent quality as the lung and the finger. And now here's the fingertip. Wait till you see this thing. This is it right here. All right, now take your time. From here to front, where it wraps around the front, it's 3 feet long. All right, so there's a foot. There's another foot. If you go this way, you got 3 feet. Now, what do we have here? We have a fingernail. All right, look at it carefully. You see it running around the front here? That's the fingernail. That is a pad, that round pad, that is a cartilage little wafer that sits in between the bones so they don't scrub on each other, the bones. Preserved perfectly. The vein and artery coming up, and again the fingernail. Now, when I first found this, it was completely intact. This was part of the fingertip. The whole thing was there. And I realized there was no place I could get blood out of this. I couldn't find any area to get blood. So I figured I'd just smash it open, which I did. And I hit there with, a little sledgehammer, boom, and it just popped right off. Because it's grip skin. Grip skin is just almost like glued onto you. Wait till you see what grip skin looks like. And this still had the fingerprints. This right here is what the grip skin is. You see it? That's the stuff that's on the bottom of your fingertips and your palms of your hand, your soles of your feet and all that. It's very, very, very tough. But there's no blood in it until you get past there, and then you're soaked with blood. Now you see this? That's one of these. That's one of your fingerprints, one of your finger ridges, they call them. These little dots are sweat pores. You see the dot? One here, one here. This is right, the fingernail is right here. The same thing on your fingers. Your fingerprints start almost at your fingernail. I mean, just right next to it. And then they fan out into fingerprints. So that's the 2 of them right together. Here they are together. That's this from this, coming right off the top, broken off. DNA tested, and when you get inside, you got blood anywhere. You got so much blood you can't even imagine. Fingertips are one of the most saturated with blood other than your heart. I'm not kidding you. They're just soaked with blood. And here's another one of my mud fossils. That's this one right here. Looks like a piece of meat. It's exactly like this. It's a tag that holds the muscle, or actually holds a body part into another body part. That's what that does. That little flap right there. And that flap is what right here. That's that flap. You see it? This flap right here. And it locks onto another body part so your shoulder doesn't rip away from your chest, that type of thing. And it also, they all have them on it here too. You see that? That's the same thing right here. There's a latch that goes across here. And it locks it in position. They all have them. Even this little tiny lung right here. You see this? That's that part right there. That's that same part. It locks that lung, that's the entry. This one here, all of the pleura washed away. So this is a whole different body part than the fascia. All the fascia is gone. That's still left. This is something medicine doesn't know about now. That's part basically into the lung. Somehow that's invested into the alveoli of the lung, because that's all you got here. That's all the alveoli are these. And that latch is in with these. All the pleura, which would have been this stuff, is gone. All right, it's like I show this one here. What you're looking at here, whoops, and I actually got my microscope going, I could show you. What you're looking at here is all those little balls are the same little balls as you see here, which are alveoli. And they suck up the oxygen. Little tiny ball holes in there, and the main oxygen goes in here and back and forth. But that is something new to medicine. They don't understand that, and that could relate to a lot of sports injuries and so forth, because this is what tags this body part into your body. And they're all every organ has it. Every single organ has the same type of an investment tag, just like that. This mud fossil's opened up a lot of stuff. Okay, I got the microscope cooking. Here's what we got. I am going to be looking at a lung, which is, this is the fabric of the lung. Now the one I have partially eroded, so that the fabric is like right to here, and then you look down and you can see the lung, the alveoli. It's in the microscope right over here. And this is a telescoping microscope, so we're looking down at it from up here. We can get much closer, but this is perfect for what we need. All right, you see it up here? That's the fabric. Whoops, you see the fabricy stuff? It's not even moist. I can make it moist and it come out a lot better. Now, way down, this is thick. This is thick, pleura is thick. So down below is where the alveoli are. Now I'm going to pan down there, and you'll see those little red bumps. You see them? Those are the alveoli. All right, I'm going to put a little water on there and see if that makes any significant difference as to what you see. This is where the pleura is. See how these things rehydrate instantaneously. This, as you're going to see, is where the alveoli is. Now look at the different types of materials here. All right, this is all red blood, but I'm going to come right down on top of it because you're going to see that it's just not blood. There's all kinds of minerals in with it, which you're going to see in this other lung. Let me turn the light down so you can see it. Focus in a little bit. All right, this is right off the edge. You see we're on the pleura, we're right off the edge here, and we're looking down. You see, that's just not just blood. There's different minerals and metals and all kinds of stuff in blood. Of course, there's a lot of red stuff in blood too. But this is where you can see it best because that's the most recent fracture spot. And that's that lung. Now I'm going to show you the one, that little one, that's all you can see is the alveoli. We're going to look at that now. Now this is the other lung I showed you. That these are nothing but alveoli, and there's the latch. There's that latch that's on all organs that holds them in place. Now I'm going to put it in a microscope, and we're going to look and see how much different mineralization there is, because it'll take on whatever can find its place inside the lung, and the lung is loaded with blood, and blood is what's transferring in and out and absorbing oxygen all the time. So whatever the first mineral to arrive takes precedence in that alveoli. The first one owns it. All right, check that out. Every one of these is like a little alveoli. Some are a little bigger than others, some are a little smaller than others, but they're all alveoli. You see this whole thing is just, that's a lung. It's covered with that. Now I'm going to show you that little latch. Where, if I can find it. Oh, here it is right here. Now you see this? Medicine does not realize that these latches are not part of the fascia. Now let me back up out of here. That latch, my friend, is built into this lung, and all of these are still all these little alveoli, and it's locked in with some really gnarly stuff that runs right about to here, and that reaches out and latches onto somewhere in your abdomen or whatever. In the case of a lung, it would have to be somewhere in the abdomen. And this is tough, grizzly stuff. Right down in here, this whole area. You see it abruptly transition here? That is gnarly. I don't know what it is, but it is gnarly. You see it? And that little triangle is what locks that organ into this particular lung into what it, somewhere probably in the abdomen. And there's a couple of tubes coming out of them. You see that little spot right there and that spot right there? I'm almost certain that's how the interstitial fluid. Can you see that? Maybe I can get a little closer. Those two little spots that I'm trying to show you, if I can home in on this, okay. Right here at the very tip. These two spots. Or 4 spots, I don't know, but I believe it's right at this tip right there. And that is what brings the interstitial fluid from this, which is the membrane fluids, to the next set of membranes that it has to transfer into. And something might happen in here, because I know the chemistry in this membrane is not going to be the same as the chemistry in the next one. And I believe it's got to do with those little spots right there. And I'll show you on my other one that you can see it a little better. Hold on. So it's these two or the 4 of them or whatever, or that this is an attachment spot. It locks it in somehow on the tip of that triangle. Alright, here is this stone that I have, and it's a piece of flesh, literally. And that was the fascia flap that I call the spur lock. And that is where it latches in. And I have it up in the microscope right now. It's over here in the microscope, and here it is up in the screen. Now, all we're looking at is the very tab. That's the very tip of the tab. All right, you see I can go back this way. Up in here is where all that really gnarly stuff is. Coming this way, we get to the very tip. And the very tip is where those, I believe it's got to do with this one and this one. I believe that's what I think anyway. Now this is a muscle, and it's transferring from this to another, probably another muscle area. So you may not have to have anything fancy. I don't know. The other one was a lung, right? The other one I think I showed you was a lung, and that has maybe has some more fancy chemistry in it. I don't know. See that's a lung, and it's cut, and where you see all the brown stuff, that's blood. The other ones are the alveoli, and each one of them, I'm going to put a little water on it, they take on their own color. You see it? When they do, they don't stay round. They sort of, pretty much all crystals have shapes to them, angularity and so forth. So what they're going to do is expand. And so I have some. As a matter of fact, let me show you this one. Because crystals, which are almost like diamonds, form inside of vugs, they call it. All right, you saw this. This is a lung. And it's devoid of basically everything. There is a couple spots that there's crystals growing in here, and they grow off of the red blood. And I think there's one right behind that red blood spot. Let's take a look in the microscope. Now, this is one of the alveoli in this lung, and that's how your oxygen comes into your bloodstream. There's a ton of blood running through here. There's crystal growing in there right now. And it would, you know, depending upon how long it was in the particular conditions for, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they add on to each other in a crystal formation, and that's what makes these really fancy looking crystals. You see that? I put a little bit of moisture on there. That's a crystal. And again, it would get bigger and bigger if it was in the conditions for a longer and longer time. But this is basically what's inside of every single alveoli. Now, I have other pieces like this. Hold on one second. All right, take a close look at that now. Let me show you something I have here that is quite similar to that. And it could have very easily formed exactly the same way. See, that's not your typical quartz, you know, crystal, and neither is this. And you can see this one came out somewhere where there was a little patch of blood as well, and it could have been just as easily right in there like that. You see, it's even scooped like that, like it was inside of an alveoli. That's what a lung looks like inside, and after this, the silica somehow oozed into here. I believe this is the same thing. You see how it's curved like that? And there's a spot right there. Basically, it would be the same thing as this. And lining that bowl a little bit. So it's not like a regular crystal. Okay, my friends, this is kind of an exciting time because Velikovsky was so demeaned and dismissed and called all kinds of names by all of these geologists and cosmologists and, you know, astrologists, all this stuff. Well, they're realizing Velikovsky was right virtually about everything. And all he had, though, was the documents. But he collected them everywhere around the world. Now, I have the physical evidence to support his documentation. Between the two, there's no more big discussion about this. Now it needs to be openly discussed. What it means, not is it real, it's real. There is no question about that. Zero question about that. And I have the evidence. So much evidence, just there's no way to dismiss it anymore. And the ones that we rely on are the ones that are letting us down. And now we have to pay the student debt because the students can't get jobs, or, you know, they were literally taken advantage of. They should have known. Well, they did know about this. They knew about this, and this changed history, it changed geology, it changed anthropology, it changed, and I've changed chemistry, physics, all of that stuff. I presented that to everywhere, and not a single response from academia. That smacks of fraud. Absolutely, it's not being a good fiduciary. They are there to act in the best interest of the students. I don't think they're acting in the students' best interest. But I'll let you make that determination. Anyway, I think that's enough for now, but wait till you see what I'm going to show you about this. This will be my next video. Ooh. All right, we'll talk then, my friends. I love you all. All right, if you've been following me, you know that the Earth basically was coated with gigantic, gigantic creatures. This is Blood Falls in Antarctic, finally solved. It's made out of iron. Well, iron is what blood is made out of. They just refused to be able to accept the reality of the situation.